Hello YouTube, welcome to the 11th video on the Land Rover Series 3 project. In this video I completely assembled the gearbox, but that is just the gearbox. First to fourth and reverse. I don't go anywhere near the transfer box, that's in the next video. So between the last video and this video I have painted a load of parts. I've got a few engine parts on there, so you'll see all that painting process in another video when I get onto the engine. But here are the parts, let's get into it. Right then, with the painting complete, I have got the box of new bits. Some of it looks like really nice quality old stock, and some of it not so much. So there's a nice lay shaft there, new lay shaft, new reverse idler gear, new first gear. This very much looks like new old stock. Look at that box, covered in some kind of a membrane or something. Lots of wax paper involved. And then this is the third, fourth synchro, and there is a spring missing. You can see two of the springs are present, but this one is not. So I've ordered, because they were pence, I ordered 4. I'm going to mess around with those. Obviously I've got to try and get that in there. I'm going to have a little mess around trying to bend those corners, making them a little bit steeper and hopefully a little bit more keen to hold on. So yeah, oh yeah, new pin as well. This tiny little, of course there are seals to rebuild it all. This tiny little pin goes in this little hole on the main shaft there, and I'll Loctite it in, and that slides down and stops that bush from rotating. But I'm also going to Loctite that on the advice of Jeffrey Crook, I think is his name, New Zealand guy, very entertaining YouTuber. I'll put a link. Yeah, so that's a new first gear, because first gear is quite tired. We found damage on them teeth. New reverse idler because that's knackered, and a new main shaft because, well, reverse is shagged on there as well. And unfortunately, try as I might, I couldn't get this bearing off here. You can see I've been attacking it with the angle grinder in there, because it's a nice old quality bearing with no real wear on it. I had to replace it, which is very annoying because I ripped apart. But there we go. So let's get this lot together. First of all, I am trying to get that spring in there, the third, fourth synchro spring. It was pretty easy. I went off behind the camera and did it on the other workbench and then came back. You don't have to take it apart at all, really, so it's nice. Here I am getting first gear ready to put on there, but I quickly figured out I needed to work on that bronze bush, which I forget now. I think it's second and third gear, those two. But you can see there's a ridge in the middle of it, so the gear has to go on the bush, then the bush go on the shaft, which complicates things a little bit. And there's that tiny pin I described earlier, which I'm just putting in the shaft now, look, and that stops the bush rotating, but it's not very strong, and you do hear these falling out or shearing off or something, and that bush starts rotating on the shaft, which is not what it's meant to do. So I put a new pin in, and I've put some Loctite on it, but the first time round, the Loctite spilt out all over the gear, so you get Loctite between the gear and the bush, and it'll lock the gear, which is obviously no good. So I had to get enough Loctite on the shaft to lock the bush onto the shaft, but keeping the gear free on the bush. That was the challenge. The rest of this thing goes together far more easily. Because I haven't altered this next gear I'm working on now, all the preload or the clearance in there is all correct. I could just put it back together. And after that, really, the rest of assembling the main shaft is pretty simple. You just slot everything on and that's that. That's it for the main shaft. You might have seen me on the time-lapse continually checking this gear. It was a little taxing to try and get thread lock on that bush, which goes underneath this gear and that gear, but without getting thread lock on the interface between this gear and the bush. I want the bush to stay still with the main shaft, but the gear obviously to spin freely on the bush. So it feels good. If it feels good tomorrow morning, then we're golden. If it's locked up, we've got a problem. But that's it. Springs replaced in this third, fourth synchro unit. New first gear. New pin holding the bush. New lay shaft. So next thing is to get that bearing on there. Put the reverse in the box itself, and then I can start putting it back together. that's that new bearing in there now. Last thing to do, I'll put a dash of oil on there as well. But yeah, the last major thing to do is get that reverse idler in now, which goes on this little, goes on that little outcrop there, look. So through that hole in the end of the casing, and then through this hole, which sort of juts out into the middle. There you go. I've placed the gear in. Just put the shaft in through that end, and you can see it now protruding there. There's a cotter pin to stop it rotating in this groove, so I've just got to tap it into place. I believe that's it now. I can start putting bits in. This could be quite a fun wrestling match. First thing is the main shaft that goes in, just slides through the bearing at the end. I think I might have tapped it home slightly. Then the lay shaft, input gear, that's the input shaft from the clutch, and then the gasket and the bell housing. Got to tap it on because it's pushing through the bearing. It's all done, that's torqued up, and I want to put this cover on basically. So there's a seal which is here, which goes on here. That's the input shaft seal, rides nicely on there, and I've got to press that in there. So rather unusually it goes in kind of what looks like backwards here as that goes on that way. So I'll get that in next. Right, that's the front end done. New seal, new gasket, torqued or tightened up. Next, to tackle this back end here, and I believe I have a new gear to go on there, which came from Ashcroft, which is the first meshing gear in the chain, if you like, for the high ratio gear set. So this is the oil slinger. It slings oil off the shaft. It goes on here and it keeps, there's a seal in here which I'm just pushing the there we go, slinger into. So that keeps the oil in the gearbox and the oil in the transfer box separate. Next, very excitingly, is our new gear from Ashcroft. And it is larger than the last one. Look at this thing, it's like Frankenstein's monster. There's a spanner head poking out of it. This is an old 22mm socket. This is a bit of galvanised pipe that used to be the washing line post outside. And this is the tool I've made. So I believe that's the back of the gearbox done, and the front done. Now it's the selector forks, which should be a reasonably sort of satisfying little job to do, really. So I've taken the, you can see it's loose there, taken the fork off the rod and put a new seal on it. They're a bit shocking, you can see they're not exactly a tight fit, but they're probably better than what was on there. Hopefully the casing and the lid will clamp those tighter, but yeah, not ideal, not ideal. Well, it seems the time lapse didn't record, or I didn't record the time lapse. That's it, folks. The gearbox is done. it is done. New seals, gaskets, new first gear, new lay shaft, new reverse idler, and a new output gear too, because of the high ratio transfer box. That's it, folks, one complete gearbox. In the next video, hopefully along next week, we'll get that transfer box together. I'm not sure if I get it all done in a video, but I'll certainly get the vast majority of it done. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you're enjoying the Land Rover Series 3 and the fact that it's back on YouTube again. Tune in soon. Thanks again.